Before we dive into today's story, make sure you're subscribed and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.
You wasted our money on stocks, David. What a fool. Emily said so loud the gravy bowl stilled, and laughter rolled like a small, cruel wave around the table. Aunt Linda's eyes cold, Mark snorting into his napkin. My brother-in-law, Tom, nudging his wife as if the punchline needed applause. I sat there like a man whose name no longer fit him. I did not answer, because words would have been proof they were right. My name is David Harper. I'm 44, from Akron, Ohio. I remember the exact scrape of the chair as I let it push back, the heat of 8 pairs of eyes like a radiator set too high. That's the kind of moment that rearranges a life into before and after, the kind that makes a man catalog every slight and miscount each one until the ledger feels like a bone-deep weight. We had a cheap lamp above the kitchen table and a mortgage that felt like an agreement with future versions of ourselves, and Emily, who had once kissed me in parking lots because we were young and reckless, now counted our risks in the way other people count bills. Neat, fatalistic, unforgiving. At the office, my name got used the way a stapler gets used. Necessary and forgettable. Robert Ellis, my boss, praised the men who dressed in safe shirts and took the memos to meetings, while Jessica got the credit for a plan I had stayed late to finish. Friends talked about college loans and PTA budgets, as though ambition were a social faux pas and not a survival strategy. Everyone had an opinion about what a real provider looked like, and none of them looked like me. Their jokes were sharpening edges. Their dismissals were small and constant. A laugh at the bar, a snide message forwarded in a family group chat. Emily's little smiles that said she had already decided I was entertainment and not a partner. I started saying yes to things I did not want to say yes to, overtime, menial favors, explanations, because I wanted to be proof against another accusation that I wasn't pulling my weight. I saved like a man with a secret plan, putting away change and second breakfasts, trading nights out for $2 coffee and spreadsheets where profit met hope, and I tried to teach myself patience. The company I studied from the margins had a ridiculous name, Verton Dynamics, and its office was on a list of places nobody cool ever mentioned. It made batteries for things that sounded like they could be filed under maybe, and that was precisely why I sent an amount there that made my gut ache when I typed it into the confirmation window. I said nothing about it. I stopped explaining. The more they mocked, the quieter I became. Silence can be armor if you know how to polish it. Emily's irritation metastasized into contempt the night she folded our laundry like evidence and declared over the dryer, "You're living in some fantasy, David, and I'm not going to be married to a man who gambles our future on fairy dust." She said it so plain I could have driven a truck through the space she gave me to respond. She told friends at the gym. She told her sister. She told the woman at the deli who always asked about the kids. She stacked small shamas and presented them with the same calm cruelty as a person setting out plates. When she finally left, not in a dramatic storm, but in 3 carrier bags, and a note that said she wanted a partner who chooses practical things, she did the severance in daylight. She filed for divorce with a lawyer who asked for signatures and promises and had a smile that felt like transaction receipts. In the papers she wrote I'd never be successful, that I was reckless with family assets. I signed the forms without an argument because a fight would have been a birth certificate for their verdict. If she wanted to hand my life over to public opinion, to let their laughter be the official document, I would not give her the satisfaction of a reaction. In the weeks that followed, she moved into her sister Maria's spare room, and our house felt like a theater after the actors leave, echoing with the memory of applause. I went to work. I slept in the kitchen for a while because the bedroom still smelled of her favorite lavender, and I let the small cruelties of other people collect like grit under my fingernails. Then one morning at 5:12 a.m., my phone beeped with a number I didn't recognize. The account I had opened under a shell of initials had tripled overnight. Verton had been bought. The tiny stock I'd been piling in to read in green numbers that made my hands go cold. I stood in the dim kitchen, and the numbers did not feel like a triumph. At first they felt like a theft of something private, until I understood they were the only language that would make the people who had laughed stop laughing. The first decision was not to gloat. I watched Emily's social feed while pretending not to, and she had posted a photo of herself with a friend captioned, "New Beginnings," as if her leaving had been a mercy and not a choice. Then I did what my years of being underestimated had taught me. I moved with the kind of economy that only people who have nowhere left to waste can. I hired a quiet lawyer, I consolidated holdings, I arranged a public-facing giving that would be impossible to call selfish and impossible to ignore. I bought out the little storefront on Maple where the landlord had once haggled me down because I was not his kind of tenant, and turned it into a scholarship office that offered small grants to kids from neighborhoods like mine. I kept my face off the initial press release that named the backers. I let other people narrate the rise story, the overnight genius headlines that always miss the nights. When the profile pieces started, Emily's sister called our mutual friend, Tony, who texted a screenshot like a paper cut of praise, and the room that had once laughed at me now clicked, like a construction of sympathy, reaching for a new place to sit. Antagonists scramble in different languages. Aunt Linda started texts sending recipes with pleading emojis. Mark's sarcasm became thin and then silent. Robert from work called with a lunch offer that tasted like a truce. Emily watched. At first, she watched through polite distance, through the lens of a woman who wanted to see whether her leaving had been an infallible move. Then, months after the bee-out and the quiet philanthropy and the small parties where I did not attend, but made sure my presence was felt in the grant, she showed up at the scholarship office door. She stood with her hair loose, with the same stunned apology in her eyes that people wear when traffic has made them late for their own lives. "David," she said, voice small and suddenly not practiced, like someone who was reading from a script written by someone else. People in the lobby murmured because appearances are a currency. My assistant, Carla, who had once told me I needed to stop being so dreamy about ideas, looked at Emily with the same blank curiosity she used on donors, and the receptionist pretended not to look. Emily asked to see me. She wanted to talk. She said she had a right to ask for a second chance, and that leaving me had been the only way she could keep the family safe. She used words like sorry as if they were tidy bandages for deep damage, but apologies are not the same as repair, and I had learned by then to read apologies as what they were, requests, not guarantees. She said the things people say when they need to be believed, that she had been scared, that she had been pressured by her mother and the suburbs' idea of respectability, that she had regretted the barbs. Her voice broke in honest places. She cried in the doorway while the receptionist pretended the tissue box belonged to the interior design. Men who had once worn my jokes now pretended they had always believed in me, and those billions of small hypocrisies were a kind of chorus for the theater of her return. My decisive move had not been a tweet storm or a billboard. It had been something harder to let her watch the life she walked away from be rebuilt without her, and understand that leaving had removed her from the architecture of my future. She thought money would hum like a moth and come back to her on demand. The truth is money hums, yes, but being part of someone's life is a map you either keep or you hand away, and maps do not redraw themselves when you come back. Emily reached for my hand in the lobby, and I let it hang there like an unanswered signal. Her ruin, when it arrived, was simple and slow. She had to live in a world where she was known as the woman who left a man before his work had matured. People who had once whispered her praise now looked at her with a kind of cautious appraisal, as though she'd been a test, and the test had failed. Her sister's house closed its doors earlier when donations came from my foundation, and a new committee asked for better boundaries. Mark stopped inviting her to family barbecues because the price of associating had shifted. Aunt Linda, who loved to set the table with commentary, sent a short, cold note about timing and lessons. I did not raise my voice when I told her that the papers were the papers, and the life I had built did not have a room for redoing vows as if they were a coat to check at the door. People wanted a cinematic confrontation, a moment of cinematic revenge where the betrayed came smashing through plate glass. Instead, I gave Emily the one thing dignity understands, the absence of spectacle. I arranged a public interview not for bragging, but because other men in kitchens like mine needed to hear that risk is not shameful and that being laughed at is not a terminal sentence. On national television, I spoke about the work, about the grants, about the quiet nights in thrift and patience. Maria Chun, the anchor, asked about forgiveness, and I said, without venom, that forgiveness is a private matter, and that some doors, once closed, are closed because they must protect the people inside. The cameras cut away to a shot of Emily in the green room, watching her face on the screen with the kind of hunger people get when they realize they've left something alive behind them. She reached out on social media in the days after with posts that begged for a public reconciliation, with comments that traced the outline of nostalgia and asked for shared memories to be returned in exchange for acknowledgement. Her plea was not loud. It was the low, thin sound of someone who has realized that what they traded for safety was a person who would not be bought back with apologies. I wrote back once, a paragraph that said I wished her well, and then I stopped. I had been taught to think of victory in theatrical terms, the crowd's roar, the final image. Real power, I learned, is often quiet, a set of small, inexorable choices that reshape who you allow into your life. The last time I saw Emily, she stood on the sidewalk as a biographical piece aired on the local news about the scholarship program and the man who refused to accept ridicule as destiny. She was thin in the light, her face caught between wanting to be seen and wanting to hide. She opened her mouth, a single small sound, and then closed it. I could have reached for her hand. I could have given her the line she wanted to hear, the one that would have been a neat, shareable ending. Instead, I stepped through the door of my office, and the noise of the lobby swallowed a last small pleading syllable. You called me a fool, now you're the one begging the fool.
Betrayal leaves scars, but sometimes it also leaves lessons. What lesson did this story leave with you? Share it in the comments, and let's see how many of us have walked through the same kind of fire. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next one.